Good evening, students. Today we're going to be talking about annexation. For those of you who are having trouble with that vocabulary, annexation is the act of adding territory. If you would like, go ahead and copy down all of these notes so you can take them along with me. We're going to be walking through this really quickly and talk about why annexation was such a big issue. I'm going to pause for a moment so that you can copy this down. So annexation, another way to refer to it from the United States perspective is the Texas question. So the question is, what are we going to do with Texas? Are we going to annex it? Are we going to let it come in? Or is it just going to stay as its own nation? With annexation, just like with everything else, there are different perspectives that we have to look at. Perspectives is just another way of saying a different way of looking at things. So with these perspectives, we're going to go ahead and kind of break all of them down and talk about how each group of people are going to see the Texas question very differently. So let's start with the United States. The United States has two different things that they have to weigh. They have to weigh their pros and their cons, the fors and againsts. So the United States, we're going to go ahead and start with the bad side. We've got a few things that the United States kind of has to worry about. So the red light, what makes them want to stop annexation? First, they don't want to make Mexico mad. You see, if Mexico is mad, then they might do something crazy, like, try to go to war with the United States. They could cut off diplomatic ties, and that could just be a really big hurt on the U.S., both economically and politically. They also are kind of worried because of Texas's national debt. At this time, Texas' national debt was huge. It was over $12 million. The redbacks, which was the Texas currency, was worth nothing. You could even say it was almost worth less than nothing at this point. It was kind of a broken state. The national debt was high. Things were getting really tough, and that's something that the U.S. was kind of hesitant to bring on. They were kind of taking their time thinking about whether or not it was worth it. The other thing that may not matter as much as you think now, but down the line is really going to impact the way that we see things. You're really going to see this happen a lot. The balance in Congress would be unbalanced. It would start to shift. You see, at this point, you had two different kinds of states. You had slave states, which were generally the southern states, and free states, which were generally the northern states. What they were worried about is, if Texas came on as a slave state, it would add a little bit more weight to the decision of slavery because you would have less on one side than the other, which would mean that Congress was no longer balanced. This is kind of the first time that we really see it in Texas history. It's the first time you see what's called sectionalism. We're going to see that word pop up a lot more down the line. But what that basically means is you're going to start to see a split between the North and the South. You're going to care more about your section than the entire country. If you're in band, you may notice that sectionalism kind of sounds like sectionals, and that's whenever you kind of break out into your own smaller little groups. That's kind of the same way you need to think about it. You had the North as a section and the South as a section, and eventually they're going to break up and only worry about their own group. Well, it's not all bad for the United States. Otherwise, they wouldn't have gone with it. You see, there's a green light stuff that's happening too. We've got, first off, more power. If we annex Texas, there will be more power both from military, because you had more people, and from land. As you all know, land equals power. The more land you have, the more power you have, the more resources you have, the more money you have. Land is a very big issue when you're talking about politics. Next up, you will also have a common culture, which is a way of life. Remember, if you have a common culture, people tend to be a little bit happier. There's less disagreements. Everyone kind of sees on the same page. So common culture makes annexation of Texas kind of a little bit of a better thing. Both sides agree with each other, so why would it be a bad thing? Finally, you have this big word that we are going to be talking about a lot more over the next couple of weeks. It's called manifest destiny. Manifest destiny, or as I always like to say, man goes westiny, is where the United States had this belief that it was their purpose to go all the way to the Pacific Ocean. They felt they needed to push there. But in order to get there, they had to go through Mexico. So President Polk, when he ran, was all for annexing Texas. You see, he was saying, Mexico, what do we care? He doesn't care if we get to war with Mexico. In fact, he almost wants it to happen. Because if we go to war with Mexico, not only could we get Texas, but as you'll see down the line, they could get even more. Now, I'm not saying this is a good thing or a bad thing, but I am saying this is kind of the way that the United States is going at this point. Speaking of Mexico, the next perspective we're going to talk about is Mexico's. Now, this one's going to be short and sweet. Perspective, their way of looking at this, is all red light. What Mexico is saying is just don't. Please, seriously, do not annex Texas. They don't want either one of these two getting more power. They don't want Texas getting more power because then it'll be harder to get back. And remember, they want Texas back at this point. In fact, they don't want them to be annexed so much, because they're even more worried about the United States, that Mexico offers to recognize Texas as an independent nation. But that's only if they don't go with Texas. Or sorry, if Texas doesn't go with the United States. So that comes with a little bit of fine print. Now, Texas doesn't end up going with this, which is what's going to lead to some conflict that we'll see down the line. Okay, finally, we're going to talk about the perspective or point of view of Texas. Now, you'll see a little bit of a difference here between Texas and the United States, because Texas is almost all green. It only has a few things that are kind of negative about annexation. And even those are kind of, we'll see. All right, so let's talk about the green lights first with Texas, since there are more of them. They want to go with the United States because they will get more power. Now, this is different from the United States. The United States would get more land. Texas would get more resources from the federal level. So they would get more military power from the United States than they would have on their own. They would get more power to help protect the frontier, because all they had at this point were Texas Rangers, volunteers who kind of came out and did the best they could, protecting these settlements from natives and outlaws. But now they would have the backing of the United States. So that's some more power that they could get behind. All right. Next up, you've got one common country. What was I going to write there? One border to defend. Now this means, B-O-A-R-D-E-R. Okay. They only have to worry about one border to defend. That means they no longer have to worry about defending against the United States. They only have to worry about the southern border, Mexico. Another good thing for them is they're going to share their debt. This is huge for Texas. They've got a big debt, again, over $12 million. And now, if they join the United States, well, that's no big problem. Now it's going to kind of be part of the United States debt instead. Just like the United States, they have a common culture, which, again, makes everybody a little happier because there are less differences in ways of life. Okay. Finally, we're going to have the balance in Congress. Remember, back here in the United States, we talked about sectionalism being a big deal. How the balance of Congress was a bad thing for the United States. Well, that's not necessarily true for Texas. See, if they join as a slave state, the balance tips towards slave states, meaning Texas will gain even more power than if they joined as a balanced state. So now it makes it a good thing for Texas because now they have a little bit more power in the United States as well. And finally, they want protection from Mexico. This is a big deal for them. They're very afraid that Mexico is going to eventually try and take them back, especially now that they have a big debt and their country is kind of weakened. Now let's talk about the couple of red lights that come up for Texas. Well, first off, they would not be independent. Well, and this is a big deal for them because they fought really hard for their independence. They worked hard, and they were trying to stay as an independent country. But is giving up that independence worth the power that they would gain? This is kind of one of those things that it is a negative, but you can see both sides. It could be divided into 5 different states under the joint resolution that allowed annexation. This is a bad thing in a lot of Texans' perspectives, but this could be a good thing also because if you look at, again, the balance of power, if there are 5 different states voting in Congress, well, now they've got even more power. So that could be a negative and it could be a positive. And finally, the only real negative here that I think I see is Galveston. Texas would give up control of Galveston over the port because under the United States Constitution, the federal government controls trade. What that means is all of that money from Galveston is not going to go to Texas, it's going to go to the United States. All right, ladies and gentlemen, this is a really quick view of the finished notes. And remember, I made a little mistake here. It's B-O-A-R-D-E-R, border. These are the notes, just to make sure you have them all down. And let's go over the broad topic again. Annexation is the act of adding territory, and we're looking at the Texas question for this kind of annexation. You have 3 different ways of looking at it, perspectives: the United States, Mexico, and Texas. All sides kind of have some positives and negatives, except for Mexico, who just does not want annexation to happen. United States is worried about the balance in Congress, worried about making Mexico bad and the national debt. Making Mexico mad and the national debt. They're really happy about having more power, because land equals power. They're happy about common culture, because when more people agree, when more people have the same way of life, things tend to go smoother. They're also really looking for manifest destiny. President Polk isn't afraid of starting a war with Mexico to gain what they believe is their destiny. Texas likes the fact they're going to get more power, only have to worry about guarding one border, and here's a big one, getting rid of their national debt. They're trying to get rid of a debt that they've gained from the very beginning of the Republic of Texas. They're also happy about having a common culture, and they're kind of happy about the balance in Congress being tipped towards slave states because now they have more power in Congress. They're really happy about getting protection from Mexico so they won't disappear back into Mexico. The negatives are they won't be independent even though they fought hard for that. They can be divided into 5 states, even though that could kind of be a good side because that tips the balance in Congress. And finally, all of the money from the Port of Galveston, all of the control of the Port of Galveston, would go to the United States. Good luck. I hope you guys study well, and I will see you all tomorrow.